All right, welcome everybody. I'm going to call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. This is the regular school board meeting of the Edina School Board, Monday, July 16th. We do have a quorum, and I would start by having John give a quick overview of the agenda for tonight.
Yes, I had a different agenda up. I've been running around. Okay, so tonight we have, on our consent, we've got some personnel recommendations. We're approving some rates of pay, some memberships in the school board's membership and Association of Metropolitan School Districts, Minnesota School Boards Association, as well as the State High School League membership. We have one report around discussion. We'll have discussion about superintendent goals. The board has worked hard on strategic planning, interviewing facilitators for strategic planning that will begin in August. We have policy updates for discussion. And for action, we'll be approving the long-term facilities maintenance budget. We have some contracts to approve with the community ed coordinators, superintendent's advisory council, and the paraprofessionals. We will have a discussion and approval of the pre-AP 10 language arts curriculum, and then we will, after the discussion of strategic plan process and selecting a facilitator, we'll have a discussion and action on that plan and that proposal. And then we'll be approving some policies. So we have some reports, some information being provided on the agenda around policy appendices, as well as the Ad Hoc Communications Committee for the board, and then AP exam summary and some staff recognition. So with that, kind of gives an outline of the meeting.
Great, thank you very much. So first on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the June 18th work session, the June 18th regular meeting, and the June 26th special meeting?
So moved.
Second. Are there any changes to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the June 18th work session, the June 18th regular meeting, and the June 26th special meeting, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, next we have hearing. Just moving this closer. Next, we have hearing from members of the audience. We do welcome community input at our meetings. We request that you sign up in advance and that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We would also request that you not make any comments about individuals. If you have a concern about a particular individual, you should bring that to the attention of the superintendent. We typically do not have board discussion of the comments that are brought at the 7 o'clock meeting. We do have the opportunity for a Q&A at 6:30. If you present questions in advance, we will have more of an interactive session at 6:30. So we also do welcome emails. So first speaker is Deidre Van Nest. Welcome.
Thank you. As a professional speaker and speaking coach, over the past 7 years, I have helped thousands of leaders and business owners become better communicators. In doing this work, what stands out to me perhaps the most is that professionals who are average communicators put themselves at an unnecessary disadvantage in the marketplace. On the flip side, not only do powerful oral and written communicators give themselves a massive competitive advantage, but they are able to have a bigger impact on people's lives because when they write and they speak, people tend to sit up and listen and take action. So what does this have to do with our schools? Developing powerful communication skills is a lifelong learning process that ideally starts when we are young. For that reason, I submit that the language arts curriculum at the high school can and should be one of the most influential group of courses our children take. When it comes to reading, writing, grammar, speaking, these skills become a part of us, and they need to be developed over time. A strong foundation at a young age is a game changer for students and will positively impact their lives for their entire life and will positively impact the world. The 2006 executive summary found in the Edina Public Schools yearbook started with this sentence: "The Edina Public Schools is committed to providing world-class educational programs for our students." World-class educational programs for our students. Based on the data you've received from Parents for Edina and the anecdotal stories you've heard from individual parents and students about the pre-AP 10 LA class, I ask you to check in with yourself for a moment. Are we doing that? Is that class rigorous enough to hold up to world-class standards? If you're honest with yourself, I think you'll reach the same conclusion that I and many others have. It doesn't. To think in a city like Edina that the resources we have available and the quality of teachers we have, that my son may graduate from Edina High School as a subpar communicator is incredibly frustrating, and to be honest, it really makes me mad. 2 years ago, we pulled our daughter Annika out of Edina and sent her to Minnetonka High School. Very reluctantly, at his request, we've allowed Noah to stay in the district, but as the LA curriculum stands now, we will allow him to take 9th grade English this fall, and we will pull him out of high school, of Edina High School to take online, we'll let him take 9th grade English in Edina, pull him out to take online English in grade 10 and possibly 11 and 12 if things don't change. As a parent and taxpayer in this community, having to pull one child out completely and another for certain classes is just not okay with me, and it should not be okay with this board. I'm speaking tonight to ask you to please vote no to the proposed redesign from the administration for pre-AP 10 English, and to implement changes to upgrade this course to reach world-class standards, the world-class standards Edina has been known for in years past. Please do this so that my son and every child in this community graduates from this high school with a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next is Orlando Flores. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, I'm Orlando Flores. I'm a longtime Edina resident, a graduate of Edina High School, and the dad of 3 Edina school children. I want to talk about the 10th grade English curriculum proposal and its alarming lack of academic rigor. My wife was part of the English task force, and my son took this class, so I'm familiar with it. You heard from my son Antonio before, and now I will share my perspective. I should tell you briefly about me so that you can understand where I'm coming from. I'm originally from Nicaragua. My family and I fled the country during the 1979 Civil War. We eventually moved to Minnesota, and this may sound cliche, but like many immigrants, I moved here seeking opportunity and freedom. Although we were low-income, non-English speaking immigrants, my parents managed to rent a small house in Edina. We moved here because of our public schools. Private schools were out of the question. I enrolled as a senior in Edina in 1986. At the time, I did not speak English well. I took 2 English classes to learn as much as I could to help me fulfill my dream of going to college: novels before college and British literature. I had an incredible teacher who challenged me to explore classics, helped me analyze text, expanded my vocabulary, and taught me to write essays. I remember that in the novels before college class, we were given a stretch assignment. I chose to read the Russian book called War and Peace. The title attracted me probably because of my life experience. These classes helped me to significantly improve my English and prepare me to go to college and eventually to law school. Studying classic literature not only helped me master English, but also gave me a frame to the constant cultural references to classic stories that we hear in the US professional world. As an immigrant and an ESL student, knowledge of those cultural references contained in the classic texts has been invaluable. My son's experience with Edina English classes was my polar opposite, and was mostly, frankly, an exception compared to other subjects taken in the school. In the 10th grade English class, my son watched 17 movies in an English class. My mom would say to that, no les da vergüenza, which means, aren't you embarrassed? For my challenge assignment, I read War and Peace. For his challenge assignment, he was given a comic book named Mouse. Although he's a very smart student, my son did not learn to write essays properly or analyze text after taking this 10th English class. My son and most of the students in Edina have advantages that ESL, low-income, mostly minority students do not have. Those students depend on this curriculum that the school offers. Many Edina families regularly engage tutors to cover the curriculum gap. This is not an option for low-income students. I had never even heard of tutoring until it came up in this context. To put it plainly, the lack of academic rigor in the 10th grade English class harms the educational and professional opportunities of all students, but it especially harms our most vulnerable. You have the power and I think the obligation to change this. I urge you to say no to this curriculum and restore academic rigor to this class. Do I still have time?
Another minute, well, a half minute.
Thank you. You know, I'm involved in philanthropically in education. I'm a president of a community college foundation, and I'm not speaking for that foundation. I'm speaking based on what I've learned. We bring in students from inner city schools, and our biggest challenge is closing the educational gap when those students come in. Sometimes they have to take classes for a year or two before they can even start taking credits. And in my humble opinion, curriculums like this one is part of what contributes to that problem. It's the lack of academic rigor that we find in a lot of inner city schools, and we find here. This is what we're dealing with when these kids go to college. My final point is, I work for a global company. I work with executives from around the world, and I tell you, the mastery of English language is a huge competitive advantage in the workforce. We talk about creating global citizens. We're in the home turf. We can do better. We need these kids to master the English language in every way. That's a competitive advantage over all the other citizens from around the world that we compete with. So please do the right thing. Turn this down. Strengthen the rigor of this class. This is the only chance that a lot of these kids have to really master English. In my own experience, this makes a huge difference. So please turn this down and strengthen the academic rigor of this class. Thank you.
Thank you. We do not have any other people that have signed up to speak, right, Sarah? All right. We do have a couple of staff recognitions to go through. There was a commendation of Mary Stusinski in an email from a student to the school board and the superintendent. The student wrote in, "Someone who inspires me is Ms., and this is a tough name, Stusinski. She is one of my favorite teachers because she's super outgoing and fun. She made an effort on the first day of class to get to know me, and that meant a lot to me. She is the definition of an amazing teacher." We also have a commendation, and she is a social studies teacher at the Edina High School. We have a commendation of Jamie Hawkinson, who's a fourth grade teacher at Creek Valley Elementary. This is an email also from a student, and that student wrote, "Jamie is Houdini. It is also profoundly touching to me, especially in these difficult times, to participate in a classroom where lessons in human kindness and respect are so deftly interwoven with instruction on critical thinking and the required curriculum. Jamie is a treasure, and I'm profoundly grateful that Creek Valley affords me the opportunity to work with her." And we thank the public and students for submitting commendations. We thank all of our teachers for the work they've done over the school year. Next, I have a statement on behalf of the district. At the May 21st, 2018 school board meeting, teachers brought forward a resolution for the Edina School Board to consider entitled "Reaffirming Commitment to All for All Plan and Strategic Direction." The board recognizes that the All for All plan was adopted by the school board in 2013, and that the goals in the plan have been important work for district staff over the last 5 years. Leadership from the Edina teachers, the Edina School Board, and district administration met recently to discuss the resolution. We all understand and agree that the educational issues raised in the resolution require more study, thought, and discussion. These are better discussed in the context of the upcoming strategic plan review, which we are in the process of going through now. In addition, it would be unusual for the Edina School Board to address these critical issues in the form of a resolution. As leaders with academic achievement for every student as our focus, we will ensure these important educational issues become part of Edina Public Schools' strategic planning process this fall. We thank the authors of the resolution for raising these issues and look forward to incorporating a discussion of them as we plan for Edina Public Schools' future. Thank you again. Next, we have consent items. Is there a request to remove anything from the consent agenda? Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Next, we have reports. And actually, before we get to reports, Ellen, did you have a request for a modification of the agenda?
Yes, I request to move item F under the action items to the end of the agenda.
So is it okay if we just move G up to E and move E down to F and F to G?
Yes,
And so if I'm stating your motion is to move item G from action up to item E and then move E and F down one. Can I get a second on that motion? Second. Okay. All those in favor of the amendment to the agenda, say aye. What? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. We will move G up to E. All right. Next, we have reports. The sole report we have today is the superintendent review. So we do a summary of the superintendent evaluation. On June 26th, 2018, the school board met in closed session to conduct an evaluation of Superintendent Schultz. In general, the board's conclusion is that Superintendent Schultz has performed exceedingly well. There were several areas of exceptional work that were highlighted. I'm going to run through approximately 6 of them. The first item is Dr. Schultz's work on behalf of the district on last fall's operating levy. Having been with the district for only a few months, he conducted over 50 public sessions, providing information to the public and responding to questions. The levy passed with an excess of 70% of the vote. The second area is his work in setting up a process for consideration of changes to school start time. Dr. Schultz facilitated community input while bringing key employees of the district before the board to answer questions and discuss the pros and cons of changes to start time. The third area of excellence is his work in putting in place budget reductions and reallocations. Dr. Schultz arranged for the key district employees that would be impacted to participate in the process and explain to the board how any budget changes would impact them. This made it much easier for the board to understand and approve the suggested changes. The fourth area is his work in providing support and development to the 4 new school board members. He provided multiple training sessions that enabled the board to function immediately. The fifth area is his work in building relationships. This is an area of particular strength, whether it was board members, key community leaders, teachers, or interested community members. And the sixth and final area highlighted is his work in creating a new culture with the board. We have a board that asks a lot of questions. In response, Dr. Schultz has made sure to understand what information the board needs to make a particular decision, and he has then brought key individuals before the board to answer questions and move decision-making forward. He has also instituted the creation of board goals. By doing so, we're able to better identify key areas of focus for the district. The board did identify a couple areas for improvement. One, we would like to see more consistent, understandable data going forward, particularly as to student performance. And 2, there was a concern that Dr. Schultz at times may take on too much work. We would like to see him delegating to make sure he is not spread too thin. With that said, on behalf of the board, I want to congratulate you on an excellent year, Dr. Schultz. The next item is discussion. We're starting with superintendent goals. And we did talk about this at the work session, and so that there were, I'm going to start by noting a couple of changes. If I can get to my notes. Maybe I'm not. All right. In goal number 1, we were adding that Dr. Schultz should implement those aspects of the strategic plan that call for steps during the 2018-19 school year. And then there was another one on goal number 3, subpart 5. Does anybody have notes on that one? Let's see if I can pull it up.
Consistency and in data consistency and accuracy, I'd want it added.
Accuracy and reporting.
And reporting, right.
And those will get revised for the next iteration. And then with those said, we were in the middle of talking about another change in relation to, and maybe Ellen, you could take over at this point.
For goal number 1, we had talked about meeting the implementation goals and timelines for this school year and measures of success created in the strategic plan implementation. That's under goal number 1.
And what you're looking for is implementation of items that come up as part of the strategic plan.
Right, right.
That are part of this school year.
Right.
So are there other comments or changes that individuals have to the superintendent goals?
Well, I actually have a few. One that I had mentioned before, under goal number 1, which is to present the results of a parent in and out survey and identify themes that can inform strategic planning. I would like this year to create a process for obtaining and maintaining annual reporting on mobility data for all students who entered and exited Edina Public Schools, so that we can better understand trends.
So you're asking that he set up a process for having the data available on an annual, year-by-year basis?
Right.
Okay, makes sense.
And Ellen, are we gonna, in that process, are we gonna be looking for deeper information as to when a student leaves, as to not just where, but as to why?
Yeah, that is my hope.
Okay, thank you.
And I think defining these, I'm not really sure what the process is and how much clarification. I'd love to get the demographics of the students both coming in, why they're coming in, and also the students that are choosing to leave.
Yeah. Thanks.
And there are 4 things that I was concerned with, 2 outcome and 2 data. And I think that I'd like to see some more hard metrics. And one of those being, say, the 3rd grade literacy, that we're compliant with the World's Best Workforce requirement that we have all of our 3rd grade students reading at grade level. We talked about the fact that there's no school in the state that's compliant with that, and so it's actually pie in the sky, but it's a movement in the direction of putting some hard metrics down. We talked about a math metric, but this is sort of in an embryonic state because we are right now in flight with a strategic plan. We want this to be woven into the strategic plan. And so we have a point here, using the strategic plan as a guide, develop processes for the school board and administration to discuss and identify measures for success. And that would be in February 2019. So we'd come around again once we surfaced from the strategic plan to look at some hard metrics, realistic metrics, not because Don's doing a good job, but anybody in that role, to have some kind of outcome. The other thing is data, and we are incorporating that with increased accuracy. I would like to see more visibility into the MAPS data. And I think, again, we're embryonic with this. Ellen and Erica both attended a seminar in Boston. Erica came back and talked about the Des Moines School District actually exposing MAP test data by site, by grade, across the district, and I'd love to see that. So more transparency was one of the hard metrics of our district. So, but again, I think we're looking at that more after the strategic plan is in place. So I guess I wanted the residents and the constituents of our district to know we have talked about that. And so we're working toward getting some traction on that.
So in terms of data, I think that it's fine to ask for data. The question, I'd have two questions. One, I'd want to know how long it would take. In other words, what's the commitment on administration's point to get the data out to us so we can balance that with other questions. And the other thing is, before we ask for data, I think that we need to know what we're going to do with the data. In other words, if we don't have a plan for using it, then I'm not sure that I want to take the time to ask for it. And so I think we just need to have a discussion that says, if this is the set of data we want, what do we expect to use it for, and where do we expect to go in terms of our decision making?
I think this was more about accountability and transparency to the community and what to do with the data, where are the concerning points, where the points of pride would be a conversation where they're involved, as opposed to some individual having maybe a more specific concern and having to email about map data, maybe across all elementaries, but to just have that be accessible, which is what you heard about in Iowa, and specific requests or follow-ups stem from that point of transparency. Is that what you were? Yeah.
I think the key is the identification of the metrics that we want to use to define what we consider success. And then where are we today? What are those benchmarks? And then establishing growth targets from there. And I think that's something that we need to create. I know, and it's listed as a goal and part of our strategic planning process. And I think in doing that, then we can have those discussions about, okay, there are other districts that use map data, and they literally base all of their metrics and the success of their district on map data. Do we do map data and MCA data? Do we do that, this, and ACT and graduation rates? And do students feel prepared when they go to college? And I think we need to look at all of that and become more educated on what a balanced scorecard could look, not only for our district, but for individual schools, and create that scorecard. So, I mean, I would love to see a situation where parents can click on their school and it will just say, like, this is where your school is, this is where we're targeting, and they can look at it at any point in time. Until we get to that point, though, and this is what I was saying earlier, until we get to that point where we have defined what we think success measures are and what our targets are, that's where I feel uncomfortable layering in metrics that we want to hold John accountable to. Because I don't think we can do that before we have had that discussion and have a very strategic, educated discussion about the importance of metrics. I want to do it well instead of doing it fast, which does not mean that we're not dedicated to doing this. I just think it's so important that we do it well. It doesn't mean it has to take a long time. I think we're talking about getting this stuff on the strategic plan around the February timeframe and then moving from there. So, that's my perspective.
And you're talking in particular about tying this to superintendent review, those goals, and we've talked about with our strategic plan, being very careful about measures of assessment for that purpose. But I think you were just talking about accessibility of data apart from the school district's data placing more emphasis on, which we'll have a conversation about during the strategic process, and data that would be tied to the superintendent, which would be stemming from that conversation as early as February, not waiting until next July 1, but not preempting it this July. And yet you're still asking for the transparency on those tests apart from these two reviews. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And also that we have a means by which we can see how well certain initiatives are taking hold. We have a new math curriculum that we're using district-wide. It'd be nice for the community to see how well that's taking and to be able to see it year over year. How are we doing with it? And to increase that visibility. So it all fits back into a large pool for the community to see, to measure John, for us to see how our curriculum's doing, how various sites are doing. So on a variety of levels.
So on the accessibility of data, are you looking to develop that set of data that we would have available during the strategic planning process? Is that, I'm just trying to figure out what's our time frame for what you're suggesting.
Well, if we could get the data during strategic planning, that would be fabulous. But I think I'm now talking about the procedures necessary to set up how
Okay.
we can get that data. So, no, I'm not talking about it being made available right now.
Okay. I just want to make sure I follow, that's all.
Yeah.
So with some of that in mind, I'm looking at the goal for personalized learning, and I would propose to add a goal to be develop a system to evaluate the effectiveness of personalized learning methods and make continuous improvements to those delivery methods. So I'm talking about systems here of evaluation. And you were just talking, Owen, about systems for evaluating new curriculum. I think that they're all basically the same thing, is that we'd like to see how the district, maybe I want to combine the two. Maybe we want to see how the district, or have the district talk to the board about how they evaluate programs and make sure that we have a system in place to tweak those programs when it's needed.
That sounds a little bit like the goal under personalized learning of develop goals, measures, or indicators
Right.
for personalized learning implementation. And maybe if that's how we're interpreting that goal, we could just be clear about that as opposed to adding anything that might be redundant. Or does this sound like a different point to you?
When I read the develop goals, measures, or indicators, I think those are the type of kind of achievement or growth goals, but you're not looking at the methodology behind it. You're talking just about setting literally the goal of we're going to improve X, but you're not looking at what we're doing on the teaching end of it.
Doesn't call into question the approach. You know?
Doesn't call it, yes. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that we are looking at the approach and the curriculum too, both. Those aspects, not just the result. When I look at that goal, it says, well, we'll develop goals, and we'll develop measurement of, are we achieving, we'll say, okay, well, we'll use the MAP score. But I want to know, what is it that some teachers are doing that make their classrooms truly effective? Do they have those types of methods? What's going on?
Wouldn't that be part of measuring the success?
No,
Just looking
measuring.
back and seeing what methodology has made X, Y, and Z successful?
Depends on your definition of measure. So if we go into this with that as the understanding of what measures is, and measures is not just an assessment, are clearly just an assessment.
I guess I don't know what you mean by just an assessment.
That a certain percentage of kids have passed their MCAs.
Well, I think we would be, in my opinion, we would be looking for leading or lagging indicators to see what is working in one place, what is not working, and then figuring out why and why not.
Yeah, but, and the key word there is what is working, right? So.
Well, what is not working is just.
And what is
important.
not, right, what is it? And that, to me, is not the measurement. So if we have that understanding that what this means is, if you want to say measures, means.
Well, those aren't the measures, that's the analysis of your measurement.
Absolutely. And I'm just saying we need the analysis of what's going on. When I read that, I don't see any analysis of what's going on.
I guess when I read this one, when we talk about developing goals, measures, indicators around personalized learning, that all of those things are going to go hand in hand. So we need to figure out how are we going to measure it and what are the indicators that it's successful. So we still have to determine some of those. But then from that, we will be able to tease out what performance measures are in a particular classroom or school seem to be better implementation, a better way of implementing personalized learning, which in all honesty, is still something we're still trying to fully understand, and how it's going to be implemented and what it really means in every classroom. So I think there is, I think what you're saying is we are trying to get there through this, and I took it as yes. However we look at those measures and indicators is going to help drive us to what we think are more successful outcomes through the performance of a particular way of doing personalized learning.
I have no issue, though, if you think that we need to strictly call out and analyze or It actually is. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'll speak closer. I said I have no issue if you feel like that we need to add in and specifically call out analyze.
Yes, that would change that whole thing for me. So I would just add that to number 3, develop goals, measures, or indicators for personalized learning implementation, and analyze results.
You said number 3, do you mean number 2?
Number 2.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'd support that.
And Ellen, are you wanting something around effectiveness?
I think that's understood.
Yeah.
So one other goal that I have, and I really want to speak to this because I think one of the strongest things we have in our district is our teachers. And one of the things that I'd like to make sure is that we are providing the type of climate and conditions for them to feel that they are successful, and so that they can be successful. And so I would like to include a goal of measuring teacher work, and I don't know if it's engagement, I'm not sure what the survey is called, but it's satisfaction and work to improve it. So maybe this year we start developing a good survey. I know that we currently survey, but I think that there's some improvement on our survey process. And I don't want to lose track of such a key area as we're looking at our superintendent goals.
So we already have a question or two about that in the survey that goes out to all the teachers. You're talking about expanding that?
Yes. I want a true review of that survey and make sure that we're getting the types of answers that that would be productive.
I'm not sure a specific survey item like that is appropriate as a goal, because I think we need to be, I know John has expressed interest in looking at all of our surveys and how we're doing them so that we have a better methodology and they're more accurate in that they're not just data that's been collected randomly, that we're working on that. So
Is that in his goals?
So, do you have that one, John? I know you've talked about it several times, but I guess I'd like to see us look at all surveys, not one in particular, because I think that's something that we work on every year, and we talk about it in teaching and learning, the parent survey, the student survey, the teacher surveys. satisfaction surveys, but we want to make sure that they're actually effective and accurate in their information. So I agree with what you're saying. I'd just like to see it broader.
I totally agree that we could look at all of our surveys.
Yeah. I'm not sure that
Let's see, then there, Sarah,
specifically called out.
yeah, I think it's probably implicit in the data, but we can make it explicit in the data.
I was going to say it would fall under data and assessment, number 3. If we wanted to add something in there about,
Comprehensive review of survey.
Yep, that would be
yeah,
good.
like a number 6.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
Other comments? So the only thing I will note is that John and I went through, as I told the board in the work session, and we determined that we're probably looking at 3 work sessions per month over the next, 4 to 6 months or longer. And so I just want us to make sure that what we should do is step back from our goals, which we've already adopted, and the superintendent goals, and say, are these a reasonable school year plan? And perhaps we start with these and revisit them in December and say, wow, we kind of bit off a lot. So I don't want to have things set in stone and then decide that it might have been a lot. And then I just want to make sure we prioritize within what we have to make sure that we don't accomplish things that aren't as important as ones that are more important to us. So I'd ask that people kind of reflect on that between now and the next meeting.
And I would want us to compare to if reviewing our survey methodology fits in with our school board goals as well. Because I agree with Lenny. I think we're going to find that we get to a point where there's more on the to-do list than can possibly be done. So we should just compare that particular goal to our goals.
Can I ask a quick question about the community engagement and communications? Under number 4, it says review district website content, page layout, text, and images, so on and so forth. John, is that something you're planning on doing yourself?
No,
or-
that would be done, so this would be the work of the district. Mary Whitey's actually, and I have already started talking about that along
Okay.
with Steve. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I think that goes with the comments earlier about the delegation to the extent possible, but the truth is, issues come up throughout the year that distract from our July to-do list. And we recognize that, we're making a to-do list as if those issues won't come up, and we'll adapt if they do.
Yeah, my only point is that even looking at what we currently have with nothing that has come up, we've put a lot on our plate. And we're not exactly sure how much time will be encompassed with the strategic plan. So I just want people to keep that in mind. I don't think that everybody is locked in stone. I think when we looked at last year's goals, we didn't accomplish 100% of them, but we accomplished a lot, and we were satisfied with what we did.
Well, don't we usually do at a minimum a 6-month check-in?
Yes.
With Dr. Schultz, and then maybe we need to consider doing that with our own goals as well.
That sounds like a good idea. Great.
Thanks.
Do you have any comments, John?
I think a lot of these goals will make sense as we begin to learn more about, especially around assessment and data and how this all fits together with the strategic plan. And our job is to figure out the puzzle pieces and how they fit together.
All right. Next agenda item is the strategic plan facilitator proposal.
Do we want to hold?
You want to hold that?
We could give a general recap of our activities to date.
Yeah, why don't we go through some of the packet?
Okay. So Sarah and Ellen, you're up.
Okay. As a strategic ad hoc committee, which includes myself and Ellen Jones and Matt Fox and of course Dr. Schultz, we've been meeting since February, just on a monthly basis, to talk about just getting the strategic planning process rolling. So trying to figure out what do we want to do with that. Do we need to hire a consulting firm to work with us, which we did the last time we did a strategic plan. And over that time period, we came up with several questions and things that were important to us that we wanted to discuss with consultants. So through the help of John, we figured out, I believe was it 6 or 8 firms that we.
8 at first, we went
Yeah.
down to 5, and then to 4 to 2.
So we started with 8, we whittled it down, and then we had phone interviews, we had an RFP go out that they all had to fill out and get back information to us. And the day before, I think the 4th, on July 3rd, we had final interviews with 2 strategic consulting firms that we had all agreed were the top 2, and have come to basically a final conclusion. We're just finalizing some details with that consulting group to make sure that everything that we had expected to be included in the deliverables is within the contract. But we're very much looking forward to a firm that will work with the district and is not so formulaic that they can't tune into what Edina's needs are for a strategic plan. And the key goal with looking at a strategic plan is reaffirming, looking at our mission. Are we still following that mission, and is that the mission of the district? And then what are the goals? What do our constituents want from Edina Public Schools? And this process will include all voices in the district, all constituencies. So we'll be doing various ways of getting input from families, teachers, staff. Everybody gets a say, gets a voice at the table so that we can put together what the best plan is going forward for Edina Public Schools. Because although we've been through this process back in 2011/12, that's a 6-year-old plan. So it's definitely time for us to refresh that and make sure that we're on task. Do you want to add anything, Ellen?
No, I think you covered that well, thanks.
I would probably just add, just as another layer of detail, is that the group we're proposing, which is MGT, which is a consulting group that does strategic planning for educational and other governmental agencies, breaks into 4 phases. One's a situation analysis. The situation analysis would be collecting data, collecting information, focus groups, talking to stakeholders, working forward to getting the input from other groups to engage or review in the development of the plan, to review the mission, the vision of the district, and then setting out strategies and objectives around achieving that mission, and then implementation of the plan, putting together, kind of tracking how we implement the strategies that are being proposed. So I think the report really lays out in detail, the proposal lays out the detail what the deliverables are from this organization.
I just wanted to thank John and Ellen and Sarah and Matt, if he ever gets here, for your work on this, because I know it's been a lot of work and it's a great proposal, so thank you.
Thanks. It's exciting work to do and important. That's all we have for now. Lenny?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the company looks very interesting. They've done work with school districts throughout the country, some of which have looked like Edina and some who are different. And so it looked like a promising company. Next item is policy updates.
Okay. So under our discussion, we have several policies, nothing that was much change. Start with policy 208, which had to do with the development, adoption, and implementation of policies. We did give more of an emphasis to the role of the policy committee in that. It wasn't really highlighted in the policy, but the sort of the first stop when people say, why don't you take a look at where our policies are. So that's just reflected. I'll go through the list here, and I guess we can circle back as desired. Policy 410, family medical leave. There is a change in days from 64-day count to 65. It has to do with where the law is on family leave. We had it incorrectly before, and it's in there correctly now as 65th day is when there's a change. And it's also an annual review policy, so that'll come up again next year. Policy 413 is the harassment policy. It's largely the same. We had some discussion over why only protected groups were cited as those protected from harassment, and this is, we even debated text about those groups or others or any others, or for those reasons or any others. But this is a very much a state legal type of trigger type policy, and so to the extent that we don't accept violence elsewhere either, we just didn't want to park more things in policy 413 than we already have, sort of meeting that state law and still having higher expectations across our district. We did change the person who was targeted from being called the student to the target or victim for purposes of the broader net that this policy does cover for those protected class reasons. And I will point out that it doesn't say gender identity or gender expression, but those are explicitly protected in this policy based off the way Minnesota's human rights policy is written. The wording is a little antiquated, but that's because Minnesota was so ahead of the time for these types of laws. 1993 when that came out, so they're not defined, so they're not listed under our list of categories, but they're included in the words that are listed. All right, finally, policies 414 and 415 are largely straight statute language, state required annual review policies, and so they're before us again. Those, by the way, were mandated reporting of child neglect or physical or sexual abuse, and 415 mandated reporting of maltreatment of vulnerable adults.
So for a number of these policies, the language is mandated by state statute, right?
Absolutely correct.
So my experience is when the wording is awkward and we can't figure it out, it's probably a legislation.
So my question had to do with what you just brought up about gender identity. Is that something that we can't clarify because of state statute?
So it's sort of a wobbly yes, because that is why we haven't clarified it before, and we've had a conversation with our district lawyer on speakerphone about this less than a year ago.
I remember.
Yeah.
We've talked about that.
And this specific question came up, should they be specifically listed? And his point was, you're going away from what other districts and what the general recommendation is for school districts, which makes it difficult to start to defend something because you're not using language that everybody has used and everybody has stood on for all these decades. And you know it's specifically covered in the state Declaration of Human Rights. Mm-hmm. And so use the language that they're using so we have their legal ground explicitly. The only reason I say it's sort of a wobbly is because we did, in another policy, start to list that and political expression or political orientation even for a policy that's coming up tonight for action. But it's not this 413, rather substantial investigatory trigger policy. That was, shall look up what the number was.
And 413 is more state prescribed, correct?
That was Equal Educational Opportunity Policy 103. That was the one where this year we did include some of those other categories, gender identity, political orientation. So apart from the significant investigations triggered by a 413 violation, where we're hesitant to change some of the protected class categories that the state law laid out, we have updated other policies to have a more 2018 list.
I guess I still find it confusing, like why, and I can see from a legal perspective that, okay, this is better from a legal perspective, but these are also policies that have a public face to them, and if parents or students that are going to misunderstand and feel that they aren't being protected, then I find that concerning. So
Yeah, I
it
think
might be like,
that's-
okay, from, you know what I mean?
That's exactly the concern, that people look at these and read them with a lens that's taken it at face value and doesn't know how much legal weight we have behind a violation of policy 413. And yet, because it's such legal weight, we don't want to use it as a mere communications vehicle. It's a powerful, significant policy, and it's not the primary vehicle through which to express our district's commitment to protection for everybody. It's a significant legal trigger.
All right, any other questions on the policies up for discussion? I thought that was a pretty good explanation. All right, we're moving on to action items. The first item is the long-term facilities maintenance budget. Can I get a motion to approve the long-term facilities maintenance budget and authorization to include these projects in our long-term facilities application? Margot.
Good evening. As the annual part of our process, since 2015, the Minnesota Department of Ed requires approval of our long-term facility maintenance 10-year plan prior to the end of July. And so that information is in your board packet. We did discuss the 10-year plan in the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting in May. Also, with the timing of this new legislation in 2015, we want to meet the requirement by the end of July, but I have always brought forth an amendment in August because this impacts our upcoming levy certification in September, and we want to have the most up-to-date information available. So it won't change the overall concept of $15 million a year. Mechanical systems, we're finishing those. And once they're done, the $15 million will lower out in 2025 or 26. What it does is the facility plan is based on Project Summer, but the levy certification system is based on fiscal year. And right now, we're just in between fiscal years with June 30th, July 1, getting up-to-date data on exactly where we landed for 17-18. And so I will bring a minor revision to you in August, but I do want to meet the MDE requirements. They do allow an adjustment in August if needed. So I think that's been a good practice. We've done it ever since the statute changed, and it's served us well. So I would answer any questions that you have.
Got a couple questions. Got a questions here, Margot. So how is it we know predictably that we're going to be at 15 million for pushing, looks like 6 years, starting 2019 to, this is not a depreciation schedule.
No.
We know that certain aspects of our physical plant will need X dollars.
Yes,
And
we
that's
do.
on contract. And then it falls off significantly in 2016 to 8 million. Is that, how is that so predictable?
Because well, to provide a little bit of history back, starting in 2000, actually before I got here, just before I got here in 2010, there was a facility study. Then there was, that particular study said we needed a more detailed study in our deferred maintenance the term long-term facility maintenance wasn't around at the time until the 2015 legislative session, but I'll use the term deferred maintenance. And so in 2011, we had, we went out for RFP for architects, and we conducted, Wold Architects was a successful architect, and we did a whole survey of our buildings, the roofs, the parking lots, the plumbing, the electrical, the windows, the mechanical systems, everything. And Finance and Facilities Committee looked at that report, and it was a sizable dollar amount because our buildings are old. And so what we did is we narrowed to the highest priority needs that had to be taken care of. And the first of that was the mechanical systems. And the second were some roofing areas. And the third would be the parking. And so the 10-year plan, which is every July when I come forward to meet the MDE requirement, we add another year on the end. So it's an ongoing. And so This plan is building upon that 2011 study. We've actually implemented all the new mechanical systems are in all the elementaries. We're moving into the next phase of the secondary schools and the ECC. These secondary buildings and the ECC are so large, it will take 2 to 3 years to do the mechanical systems in each building. And so we know once the mechanical systems are complete, we still have a lot of deferred maintenance needs annually, but the sizable dollar amount of replacing mechanical systems won't be there. You know, it'll eventually come back again 20, 30, 40 years from now, but it won't be here in this particular 10-year plan. In addition to that original study, then on an annual basis, and to be honest, it's almost constantly, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, Eric Hamilton, as he's out in the buildings, whether it's implementing the construction funds and the building as the building bond or these long-term facility maintenance projects, when he's out in the buildings and he's observing and visiting with principals, there is a perpetual list. So if he's working with a building principal and a need is identified in deferred maintenance, but we can't address it right now because the priorities are the mechanical systems, for example, it's on a list, and we put it out there in the 10-year plan so that we do not lose track of it.
And it wasn't, part of the problem was we were so far behind when they did the
Yes.
study.
Yeah.
That we put together a plan to try to get the big stuff. And I remember Lenny and I were on this in our early days. And then when we did the referendum, we were able to actually buy some economies of scale in terms of putting things together at the same time, but we had a lot of work to do. So actually coming off of the 15 million is a good thing because we'll actually have gotten some of the really big things done that unfortunately you don't show off at a party, but it's the good stuff. I mean, it's the furnaces, it's getting dehumidified air in our buildings, because deferred maintenance is a special levy that we can do specifically only for this, different than other things.
So if memory serves me correctly, if we went back about 10 years, we were spending $1 to $2 million a year.
It was nothing.
And so that level is what contributed to the buildup in part. The other thing is, I think that the architects told us that we should be figuring, 2% of your building value on an annual basis for upkeep. So that I think that the number that you dropped to is trying to approximate more of keeping pace as opposed to catching up. And so that's why we have the 15 million drop to a lower number. And it's based in part, I think, on the architect saying X amount per year should be used towards upkeep.
Yes,
Is that-
to keep that in an ongoing fashion so we don't get behind again.
Yeah.
And we did not always qualify for what's now called long-term facility maintenance as a district. I'd have to look back, but I think the first years we qualified was somewhere around 06, 07, 08. I want to say 07, 08, something like that. So the access to these funds were not always available to us in Edina.
Because not all school districts qualify for this. It's the age of our buildings that qualifies us to levy this money to actually keep our buildings intact.
And it's consistently 15 million for 6 years here because we're doing one school at a time or a couple schools at a time in batch, or do we have them on a schedule?
Well, part of it is the projects and the cost of the mechanical systems and how we can balance that. It's also what the original discussions that we had as Finance and Facilities Committee in 2011 and 12 and 13, honestly, where we started at 10 million, and because we knew the secondary schools were coming online, the mechanical systems were going to be so expensive, and we had significant deferred maintenance needs. Some of it is what can we balance fiscally and manage tax impact too. And so it was all of those things coming together and saying, okay, 15 million is the right amount, or the amount that is manageable. We can address our needs and still have a reasonable tax impact.
Okay. Thank you.
There's a long study on this if you would like to have a 200-page read.
Yes, there is.
I think I just found it in my box the other day. All right. Any other questions on this particular issue? All those in favor of approving the long-term facilities maintenance program budget, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next, can I get a motion to approve the 2018 through 20 guidebook of professional employment for community ed service coordinators? Go ahead, sorry.
Yes, good evening. We have negotiated with the Community Education Services Coordinators on the 2018-20 guidebook because they're not an organized union per se. And so for the next 2 years, for year one, they will receive a 1.76% increase on salary and a 1% increase year two. For health insurance, they will have no increase for 2019, but for 2020, they will have a 3% increase. And then their vacation days were scaffolded depending on the number of years of service in the district. And beginning this year, they will have 21 days, and next year they will have 23 days of vacation. So the total is 2.74% increase, or a cost of $628 because they're a very small group. One additional, which is also within the parameters that were identified by the board in May. And one additional item, which is not a costed item here, is the fact that they will start developing a sick leave pool, and they will be participants of a sick leave pool along with a few other members, a total of about 18 members, since it's a small group. And as many of you are aware, the teachers developed a sick leave pool starting this past school year, and it has been really successful. And so other groups are coming along board as well. I will welcome any questions.
Any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the 2018 to 20 guidebook of professional employment for community ed service coordinators, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Next, can I get a motion to approve the salary compensation for the members of the Superintendent's Advisory Council for July 1, 2018 through 2020? Gwen, you're up again.
Okay. So for the Superintendent's Advisory Council, they will have an increase of 1.75% increase year one and 1.75% salary increase year two. And they will have no increase on their health insurance, so there will be no additional contribution from the district for insurance for either years. And the other thing is that starting in July 1 of 2019, the amount of money that is a match for their tax deferred program will be increased by $750. And as I shared previously, they will also be they will be developing a sick leave pool as well. They'll be part of that. So the disaster leave portion will go away and be replaced by the sick leave pool. Their total package is 3% over the duration, the 2-year duration of the contract, which is a cost of $57,824 increase. I welcome questions again.
Any questions? All those in favor of approving the salary compensation for members of the Superintendent's Advisory Council, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Next, can I get a motion to approve the master agreement with the Minnesota School Employee Association on behalf of the paraprofessionals?
Second.
Gwen, you're up again.
Okay. So with the paraprofessional group, one of the things that we do is we take a look at the salaries or wages of each of the bargaining groups to see if they're in alignment with other bargaining groups across our community. Specifically, we compare our current salaries with those of the Lake Conference, and we realized that we needed to do a salary or a market adjustment for this particular group. We brought that information before the board HR committee, and they were in agreement after we showed the data. So their salary increases are a bit different, as you will see. For the, we're making some adjustments with the steps, so instead of having 6 steps, they're reducing to 5 steps. And also, there's going to be a 30-cent increase in year 1 for both our instructional assistants and our educational or special education assistant groups. And then there will be a $1 per hour increase for the EA or educational assistant group. And then $1.30 per hour increase for the instructional assistant group in year 2. So we really kind of did a modified schedule, created a modified schedule to try to make it more comparable, our wages more comparable with other wages that we work with, other districts that we work with. There's also no additional district contribution towards health insurance for year 1, but for year 2, there's going to be a $100 increase just for those who are taking single insurance coverage, starting January 1 of 2019. And they are also offered dental insurance, and so they're going to have an increase of $25 because of the fact that we're self-insured with dental insurance. Our dental costs have really been pretty low, but there's going to be an increase effective January 1 of 2019. We also offer some life insurance coverage, and that will increase from $10,000 to $20,000 in year 1. We have technology paras, and they will receive a stipend of an increase of 50 cents per hour effective July 1, and then they will receive another increase of July 1 of 2019 in the amount of 50 cents per hour. There will also be one additional day that they will be eligible to receive pay, because when we think about the winter breaks, there is no there's no paycheck for many of these people. So they're receiving one additional pay day. And then when you look at the total cost, it's 7.41%, which is within the guidelines that were set and adjusted by the board HR committee. And they also are very enthused to begin having a sick leave pool. So I thank Tom and the teachers for creating this role, because we have a number of groups now that are going to have a sick leave pool as opposed to disaster leave. Any questions?
Any questions? All those in favor of approving the agreement with the Minnesota School Employees Association on behalf of the paraprofessionals, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Next, we are on to policies 103, 621, and 713. Can I get a motion to approve those 3 policies?
So moved. Second.
Amira.
Yeah, so 621 and 713 are what we saw before. 103 is as well. Just again point out that there is sort of a different approach we took between 103 and 413. 103 has to do with equal educational opportunity, and we've listed some other forms of protection that we value here, including gender identity and political orientation. It does say in the next paragraph, see the policy on harassment for some further definitions as what harassment is, and that's the one where we did not change it. So there is an inconsistency to point out.
Do you know if this one is prescribed by the state as 413?
I don't know. Do you happen to know, Sarah? Yeah. it's not a policy that we look to as having had that restrictiveness around it, like a trigger.
Right.
That being said, I don't know, it's an awkward balance we're striking between trying to express district expectations and where we expect our professionalism and what's protected, and then 413 being our actual state compliant investigatory policy. Gender identity, as it is more explicitly protected in state law, just under the antiquated, broader definition of sexual orientation. It includes an expression of self that's not necessarily consistent with biological indicators. I have to look at the law to see how they used it, but political orientation is one that we've kind of grabbed out of whole cloth, really trying to capture some of the conversation that the board has had over the last year and the community has had about the role of professional education. And it's not wrapped up in 413, but here it is in 103 about equal educational opportunity.
I have a quick question, and it's more semantics, but this sentence reads really awkwardly to me. It says, "The district does not unlawfully discriminate on the basis of race, creed, color." Why is the word unlawfully in there?
So it's not in the next paragraph where it says the district prohibits the harassment of any individual for any of the categories listed above.
Why can't we just say we don't discriminate?
Yeah, I think
Because do we lawfully discriminate? It's very odd to me.
it may be trying to not say that anybody's definition of discrimination qualifies, that the top
Oh,
one.
it has to be like a legal, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Well, it does sort of, but again, we're already using other words, and so I don't lean on that argument so hard on this policy.
I'm trusting you here, so.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Ellen? Oh. All right. All those in favor of approving policies 103, 621, and 713, say aye. Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Motion carried. The next agenda item is pre-AP 10. I know we've got some people here waiting. We have a school board member whose flight was delayed several hours, and so I'm going to ask if we can flip F and E, if that's okay with the board. And so can I get a motion to move strategic plan facilitator proposal next on the agenda?
Is he on his way?
I believe so. So can I get a motion? Can I get a second? All those in favor of flipping E and F, well, which is now F and G, I suppose, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Strategic plan facilitator proposal. All right, and I want to note, I guess I don't need to, so Ellen or Sarah, any additional comments, or John, did you get?
Actually, I would defer to John, because he was just clarifying with the contractor. to
Yeah,
make
so
sure that-
the point of clarification was, there's a discrepancy. The proposal that was a response to the district's request for proposal was for, if you looked in there, it said that implementation is optional in that proposal. And some of these proposals become boilerplate for them too. We did have discussion as a committee that we asked that implementation be part of the work that MGT will do. And it is laid out in the agreement that implementation is part of the phases. I did confirm that with the principal, Mr. Fred Siemens, and he did say that the dollar amount, which I believe is around $86,000, does include the work of implementation with the district as part of the strategic plan.
All right, so actually we should start. Can I get a motion to approve the agreement with MGT Consulting? And I would add subject to council's approval.
Second.
That would be council's approval within this week.
Yes.
So barring any other action from this board within this current week, there'd be no more contingency on our approval.
Correct. And if they have just minor changes, then it's not going to come back. If there's something substantive, then we'll end up having probably a special meeting, because we would like to get this facilitator retained and get moving on the process. So is there additional information? Amir? Oh, you were turning it off. So the committee talked to a number of people, and was the committee unanimous in saying this is the person or the group that we should go forward with?
Yes.
All right, any questions? All those in favor of approving the agreement with MGT Consulting, subject to this week's review by council, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. We are on to pre-AP 10. I get a motion to approve the redesign of the pre-AP 10 English course. Second, please.
Second.
And do we have a presentation?
We weren't planning on one since we had that before, unless there's questions the board has. We stand ready. Both Andy and Caroline and Randy are here to answer any questions the board has.
So are there questions? I know we talked about this at a work session. We talked about this at length at the last board meeting.
Well, I have some comments. You know, as I've said before, I want to win for everyone in this. And this has been a very big issue for many people. And I appreciate what the language arts staff and faculty have done. They've put some work into this, and we've seen some significant improvement in writing. That said, I'm seeing the rigor not quite being there. The average Lexile is under 800, whereas Common Core prescribes 1080 to 1305. We're still falling quite short of that. In addition to that, we're not seeing a real broad selection of eras. I'd really like to see much more of that. So because of that, I will have to vote no on this. And I want to frame up my thoughts here with what's at stake, what's in the balance. And here in the school board, we deal with what I would call ancillary versus primary tasks. And every organization has that. If you're 3M, you're trying to innovate. If you're the Vikings, you're trying to win football games. If you're a school, you're trying to teach. We have human resources. We have school start times. We have long-term facilities maintenance. Those are all important, but they're secondary. They're ancillary. The actual course content is primary with our schools. And so this is not a secondary consideration. This is central to what we're about. And in our strategic plan, we talk about the partnerships that we want to seek with the community. And there have been a sizable large membership in our community which have vocalized opposition to this curriculum. And I'm not seeing a tremendous effort at reaching something that satisfies a certain group within our community that would like more rigor and would like a broader selection of eras for our texts. We're not having that. In addition, one of our missions with the district is to offer voice and choice to our students. We have 650 kids every year come through 10th grade. And when they hit LA 10, they have one choice. That's it. We don't have a choice of enriched or standard. We could have a selection of have this course as it is or a more traditional. And I can get into that in just a little bit. But we're not really honoring a lot of voice and choice with this. Beyond that, we have compliance standards that we are to meet. And one of the policies that we've just discussed is graduation requirements. And Minnesota Academic Standards, Language Arts, that's one of them. And if you Google or Bing that, that brings you to what are the Minnesota Language Arts requirements, and that talks about Common Core, which is one of our requirements, and we're not meeting Common Core. One of the tenets also that I haven't brought up is that Common Core also requires that we have certain principal American speeches that the students study. We, I think, maybe have letters from a Birmingham jail, but we're supposed to have more than that. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, for instance, George Washington's second inaugural address. We're not meeting that. That's actually part of the Common Core. So then, who are we 7 Matts Cumming to even think about this? Well, we're the school board, and as I've brought up in the past, we have a statutory obligation to select the text and the curriculum of the district. This is 123B.09. You can look it up. I've cited it in the past. We delegate that to our administrators, to the teachers. But we do have full authority to actually choose particular texts. That's not what I want to do, but we have a lot of authority with this. I think events now are compelling change, and change that requires commensurate action that is prudent. What's commensurate action with this? I think that 2 things at this late hour. I mean, school starts in, 6 weeks? And this is not an abstract consideration for me, because I do have a 10th grader, a rising 10th grader, and I don't bring my own family into this very often, but I think about this in terms of my own personal family situation. I'm not excited about having my kid in this class, and I would like some other alternatives. And I would suggest one of 2 things. A parent group has suggested a number of modifications, small modifications to the curriculum. If we could do that, I would be pretty excited about going forward with what we have here. And that's been sent to all of us. We've seen it before. The other is to purchase a curriculum and pilot it. And we've got some real solid options. Springboard from the College Board, they actually are the company that does the AP tests. They've got their own curriculum, and I think there isn't going to be a lot of contention about that. I think we all could agree on that. If we just pilot it, 30 to 60 students, we could probably find a teacher who would be willing to work out the particulars of the curriculum, work out a budget, and I think there's a tremendous will for something on that order. So I think one of those 2 options would satisfy me in terms of moving in a positive direction. And what I think is exciting about either of those options is that in a year, or let's just say 6 months, we'll have a pilot underneath us that we can evaluate how has this been going to see what we would like to do next year. Do we want to broaden this? It gives us we can put our toe in the water to see, is this working, is it not, make some course corrections. And I think that there would be some tremendous support for this within the community. So those are some starting comments I have.
So before I make any comments, of course, I would ask either Randy, Caroline, or Andy to address the questions that have been raised about rigor and compliance with state standards. So I'm looking for one of the 3 of you, or all 3.
I have the microphone right now, but I will surely pass it along to those who are willing to talk. So let's talk about rigor for a second. So part of the work that the teachers did in identifying rigor, and so if we just kind of talk about what rigor means, rigor is about moving a child's thinking from facts and from knowledge to upper level generalizations, discovering of principles, pattern recognition, theory development. That's what we mean when we talk about rigor. It's the level of thinking that we're going to employ in the classroom, the level of thinking that we're going to get children to partake in as they're engaged in lessons. So how do you do that? How do you do it in a classroom? Well, one of the first ways you do is you start by asking some really engaging questions to kids. And so teachers take time to write thought-provoking, engaging questions. They're called essential questions in curriculum development, and they're higher-level questions. They're developed for each unit to provide an inquiry-based approach to learning. So it's the essential questions are really designed to hook and hold student interest. You also look at what are the big ideas that kids should walk away from each unit with, because those are the generalizations. Those are the principles you want kids to discover and assemble and put together in their brain. And we call those enduring understandings. So those big ideas are articulated concepts that students will be grasping in each of the units. So part of the part of the first two steps in establishing rigor are developing these higher level thinking, engaging, hooking questions, and then making sure that what's really clear are these big ideas that you're trying to move children to, or in this case, teenagers. Critical reasoning will be demonstrated through the writing products that have been embedded in each of the units. Some of the writing examples that the teachers worked on, a character analysis paper, a research paper, a personal narrative, explanation of analysis essays, and then practice on writing for AP prompts. So all of those are embedded in the course. Another way to establish rigor is to provide creative and authentic opportunities to demonstrate learning through that writing, through performance-based assessment, through speeches, through presentations in the class, through projects in those units. When students can take learning and apply it to new or novel situations, that is the true measure of learning. When there is transfer of concepts and skills, that is the true assessment of in-depth learning. Problem solving, problem finding is highlighted through the curriculum, but a greater focus in the nonfiction and the research unit. Recall that we did take some of the feedback from our a more recent work session back to the teachers and extended that nonfiction unit. We added 4 texts of additional errors, specifically higher Lexile textbooks, or books rather, not textbooks, but books rather, in that particular unit. The final unit will necessitate students to apply knowledge that they gain throughout the year through texts of their choice. So there are elements of choice embedded in this class. Reflection of learning will be analyzed through common formative and summative assessments. There's work to do around that yet for the teachers. But this course is aligned to the standards as they are from the state of Minnesota. The teachers know the standards extremely well. And the standards lay out a scope and sequence of skill development and knowledge acquisition that kids are going to achieve as they move through a language arts program inside of middle school and then inside of the high school. And this course is a piece of the larger puzzle, but it is definitely aligned to our standards. And we use those as a base to create this curricular approach. So that was a long ramble around rigor. And what was the second question?
The question came up about it doesn't meet state standards, Common Core.
Okay.
I know Caroline talked about this last time.
So I don't know if Caroline or Andy want to add to that, but it is definitely aligned to the standards. That's been our base. That's where we start from.
You can grab this one, Caroline. Just take the mic right off the...
Hi, I'm Caroline Linden, K-12 Literacy and Language Arts Coordinator. Happy to be here to talk with you again today. So I think Randy was talking about rigor, and one of the other questions that has come up is about Lexile, specifically Owen from you and others. But Common Core lays out a three-legged approach for defining rigor and rigorous texts. Lexile, or another numeric or sort of formulaic analysis tool, is one of those three. And so if we were to look at the exemplar texts listed in Common Core, many of those are not within the grade level band that they state as 9 and 10. So it's a little confusing. So the Lexile alone can't be the only way that we measure the difficulty of a text. So if we look at Appendix B, which goes with the Common Core, they talk about the 3 prongs. One is that quantitative measure. The other are the qualitative components of a text. And then the third is the reader and task considerations, which gets into what Randy was speaking about. What are we asking students to do around the thinking regarding a text? And so Lexile is one of the 3 measures laid out by Common Core as to how we determine rigorous texts.
I would love to respond to that. Yes, indeed. I have it right here. That's quantitative, qualitative, and reader task, as we had talked about in the work session. And you don't want to just go by Lexile, because Lexile does not give you depth of field, if you will. It doesn't give you foreshadowings and recollections. It doesn't give you multiple meanings. There's all sorts of things that Lexile doesn't pick up on. So you want, obviously, high quantitative, qualitative, but they don't give us an out on, unless I'm misreading something here, they don't give us an out on that. They still want us to hit the baseline of 1050. And yes, they'll give us an exception or two, but not an average below it. And that's what concerns me. And I think to some extent, Lexile gets dismissed as just being a series of commas. And I don't think we can dismiss it like that, because I think it introduces subordinate clauses, independent clauses, rearrangements of thought. The student needs to do some mental gymnastics to keep the thoughts in balance. Lexile also measures vocabulary, and there's just simply a challenge to that. The mechanics of reading are missed if we short on Lexile. And sometimes it may appear to be gratuitous, but part of what we're trying to do is to confront the student with difficulty. And that's what concerns me. I'd like to just see it raised across the board to meet with that standard. And Caroline, you have also brought up that other schools are also not compliant. And, well, that is the case, in fact. But to me, that they're doing it doesn't satisfy me, that we're not doing it. That, as had been read here, earlier today, one of our goals as a district is to be world-class. And if we're world-class, we're looking past the pack. We're not just looking over our shoulder. We're seeking the very best. And to me, we're not seeking the very best when we go with a lower Lexile. So, thoughts, comments to that?
I would refer you back to the exemplar core, Common Core list. Many of those texts are below their Lexile range. It's a guideline. It's one of the pieces of the puzzle. The other piece that the Common Core Appendix B refers us to is teacher judgment as far as selecting texts. Common Core has not prescribed a list of texts. College Board does not prescribe a list of texts. It's a very complex task that teachers take very seriously. So the teachers have taken into consideration all of those items and have followed the recommendations that came out of the stakeholder feedback groups, and they have met those goals.
I acknowledge that the Common Core permits teacher judgment, and that's why
They require it, actually.
require teacher judgment, want it, because for many obvious reasons. That said, I think we can still put parameters around the teacher judgment and ask for a higher Lexile within that. And the exemplars can deviate and go below because they permit that, but they're still asking for a higher Lexile. So we may have to agree to disagree on this, but at least we've been able to have an exchange.
Yes, thank you for your feedback.
Thank you.
Are there other questions of individuals? Are there comments, other comments?
I have, or do you want to go first?
You sure your mic is on?
Okay, we've been asked to approve a change in curriculum that lies outside the normal process for curriculum review. I understand that this interim review and proposed change to the pre-AP English 10 is an exceptional circumstance. I feel that the EPS curriculum review process should be followed whenever possible, and that this current review represents what should be a very rare departure from that process. Since its inception in 2012, the pre-AP English 10 class has generated a large number of comments and complaints from parents and students about the structure and content of the class. Our teaching staff have made some progress to bring about interim adjustments. Language Arts is scheduled for its next full curriculum review very soon, and I expect a more thorough overall analysis and adjustment to 10th grade English at that time. Because complaints and concerns about pre-AP English 10 have continued despite the adjustments that have been made, I want to commend staff for their bringing forward this issue to us for consideration. I appreciate and respect the teachers and administrative staff's time and efforts to address the concerns about this class. Tonight, we're given a choice between approving the proposed changes to pre-AP English 10 or voting down those changes, which would result in continuing the class unchanged for the coming year. For me, this is a difficult choice, as I feel that there is a need for change, but the proposed changes do not address some of the issues that I see in the class. First and foremost is the issue of differentiated instruction for students at different levels of English proficiency and learning levels. I've not heard from staff how the adjusted curriculum will help students who enter 10th grade at a below grade level proficiency to get up to grade level. Closing the achievement gap in this way is one of our overall goals, and yet the current curriculum has not made progress toward closing the gap, and I don't know how the adjusted curriculum will differ in this regard. Another issue of differentiation is for the advanced learners in this class. As I stated in January, and as the board discussed at our June meeting, this class needs to have a structured way to engage and challenge our advanced learners. The board discussed that the class have a defined honors curriculum incorporated into it. I will offer as an amendment to the proposed class requiring honors differentiation, recognition, and weighted grading to be available to students no later than January 2019. I'll be proposing changes to Policy 618 at our next policy meeting. This is the policy that deals with weighted grading for AP classes. I'm confident that if this and any class is properly differentiated to meet the needs of all levels of learners, the level of rigor in the class will be appropriate. I have asked for a thorough review during the fall of this new class as it is implemented. As for the content and tone of the class, as the governance body of the board, it is the board's job to set high expectations for our staff for their professionalism in all aspects of their jobs. As our teachers uphold these expectations of professionalism, I am confident that the content and tone of their classes will be appropriate for the topics they're teaching and for the maturity of their students.
I think I heard you saying that we would vote tonight to require the honors version in the second semester. And I remember Ms. Beaton hearing you say that you would spend the fall just looking into that option and giving us your recommendation at some point with enough time to implement it in January for that second semester. What is it that I guess, how is it you were going to go about looking for that? What information were you going to seek out to form your recommendation as to whether that would be a viable idea for January or not?
Good evening, everyone. Andy Beaton, principal at the high school. One of the things that we talked about, I think that came from the last board meeting, was a discussion about, is it a feasible plan to look at the possible earned honors implementation for second semester? And I said that's possible for us to look at. Given time, we had a group of teachers that were interested conceptually of what that looked like. So this would be honors by performance, not honors by registration, which I'm very interested in as a concept of having that differentiation that's Board Member Jones is talking about. So I think if this is approved and we're ready to go, because there's still work to be done to put this course into place for the fall. I think our teachers are waiting to see if they are indeed going to be putting together rubrics and writing assignments and ordering books and things like that based on the approval tonight. And part of that work, if that came out, is our exploration, and if the board says this needs to happen for second semester, then we will get to work. Part of my discussion I've had with Randy is looking at how we get support to our teachers to put something like this in place, which is unique and creative, and I think it's something that I would support.
So, real quick,
Yeah.
the idea of this honors embedded
Yeah.
didn't come from the board. It came from teachers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. So this is something that, with the discussion of rigor, just like the discussion of nonfiction or Lexile feedback that came back, we went back to the team, and this is something that the team has talked about. They didn't feel ready to start on day one with this because there's a complexity about what this looks like. We want a true earned honors to not be about more or volume. We want it to be about complexity and rigor. So that's the difference in how you actually put that together and frame that and assess that. Will take some time for the team to be able to examine.
And you're comfortable if the board says tonight that that's a good idea to have implemented by January, that that's a reasonable instruction?
I think it's reasonable, and I think we can put it together. Again, in that pilot phase, about what that looks like, absolutely. It'd be something new and unique, and if it's something that works for Edina High School, we can look at the idea across different courses, content areas. I think it's something that has some real value.
And of course, if January might be a time for implementing, but they might actually get to it earlier. We're just not
You know, I
setting
think
a
it's
time
also,
frame.
we might look at the experimenting with a unit, you know, one particular unit within the
Right.
course. But I think they have to see how that works and how they would pilot that idea.
I think that starts to get towards some of the lingering concerns about how do you incentivize students to rise to their potential. We've talked about choice books, but not an incentive to take the harder path. And it's one thing, we've heard this from parents as well, one thing to make students motivated enough to register for the harder path, but not necessarily to opt into it day in, day out, week in, week out when life gets busy and hard and they're falling behind elsewhere. And so I think this starts to bring in that incentive. I do like that. My lingering concern is, well, in addition to being eager to hear more on the discussion of text complexity, but it's been that there's only one course to register for, and this starts to address that concern. I think there's still an interest on the board to explore that more fully during the strategic planning course. That's really not an option for fall of 2018 to have two courses, but it is something that we'd be discussing. This earned honors within a single registration course adds some complexity to that conversation. It'd be very interesting to hear it play out. I'm eager to gather more information. I don't consider this matter closed after tonight's vote in any event, not even waiting for the next cycle, because we're getting feedback on this course, should it go forward in November, and then again later from students, hearing how they're going. I'm sure we'll get feedback from teachers and parents and administration as well. And so this is an ongoing conversation, and there'll be action, I'm sure, in response to what we've learned over the next 12 months in the future. And so I appreciate this attempt at addressing the differentiation and rigor concern in the next 12 months, from January on, not waiting for the follow-on conversations that use strategic planning input. I'm excited about it.
Oh, I tend to concur more with where Owen's head is at. Having been at this for a while, I was somewhat frustrated with the proposal because I was hoping to see some more rigor and some more change in the course. I agree, though, with what Owen has stated about the writing. I do see some more rigor added to that, and I was appreciative of that. I continue to be a little concerned, though, about some of the book selection and the lower Lexile. And again, we're still stuck with this concept of we offer multiple choices in language arts, and then we just take them away, and then, oh, you can have them back with AP courses. And if the concept of this is for all kids to have high rigor, I don't see that being implemented here. If bringing all kids together so that everybody gets the highest level of coursework, I don't see that reflected in the new presentation. I'd hope to have some more compromise in some of the suggestions that we've seen over time from parents and from concerned students and parents who've been concerned with this class. So, I don't want to reiterate everything that's been said, but this was not the outcome I had hoped for. I had hoped that after our work session the first time that we could have found some more compromise in some of the suggestions that were made and discussed, and we haven't gotten there. And so I continue to see us stuck with kids being given one choice. The honors thing sounds potentially promising, but again, there's a bit of a leap of faith there that concerns me again. And I am I had hoped for more, and so I'm very reluctant to consider this a massive change. This is not a massive change to what the course has been, and so I continue to not be in favor of this. I would prefer something, either two choices or something that's guaranteed to have higher rigor, and I think we could have gotten there, but I don't think we have.
I guess I have 3 points to make, and one is, as a board, we basically have the option of voting yes or no on this proposal. And if we vote no, that means that we have the class from last year. If we vote yes, even if this is not the curriculum that you guys would like to see from a Lexile perspective, I personally don't think it's perfect, but I do think it is vastly improved. And I think it's very important that we move forward and we make progress. I genuinely appreciate the feedback from community members and suggestions they've made about improvements that we could make. From my perspective, I don't think any of these are viable options at this time from a timing perspective, and also because just from a process and procedure perspective and violating our own district policies. So I think we have to be realistic as to where we are at, and I don't think we can afford to vote no and not make progress on this curriculum. Despite some of the concerns I continue to have, I support moving forward with this class. I appreciate the efforts of the administration and the teachers. I think the class is a great improvement from what Owen and Sarah said from a writing perspective. I think language arts classes are so important, not only for the reading, the input kids take in, but the output. The writing is key to that. I also like the unit where students can choose their own text to read, which can be at the highest lexile that they want to read, and I like the addition of the original source documents that you've added. Additionally, I actually appreciate that the team chose to keep the graphic novel, which I know has a very low lexile, but just to me, this is a perfect example of how we can't hold our hats on just one thing, but we need to provide a balance for people. So just very recently in April, a whole body of research came out that was highlighted by Northwestern University Education Department and was published in journals such as Brain and Language and Cognitive Science, and I'm just going to read a quote because I tried to paraphrase it and I did not. It says, over the last decade, graphic novels have become a popular format in classrooms, partly due to their appeal to reluctant readers. More recently, a growing body of research focused on how the brain processes the combination of images and text indicates that graphic novels are also excellent resources for advanced learners. When students read visual narratives, the activity in the brain is similar to how readers comprehend text-based sentences. However, when students learn to read graphic novels with an analytical eye, depth and complexity are added to the reading process. With graphic novels, students use text and images to make inferences and synthesize information, both of which are abstract and challenging skills for readers. So it's just another example of why I actually do think lexile number is important, but I think it's also important not to have lexile number as the only judge of what can make a book rigorous. My last point I want to make is I personally think the key to the success of this class will be your promise to measure the success of the class. And I really appreciate that. And your willingness to come back to us and tell us how the class is going based on teacher and student feedback. That's something I intend to follow up with you about. I remain concerned about the balance of text complexity across novels. And I want to hear specifically if students are feeling challenged. And to what Ellen said, I want to hear how student differentiating is working from our lowest levels to our highest level learners. I'd like to hear more about the writing assignments. My expectation is that as a board and district, we will be analyzing and making a decision about how we can still improve this class based on what we have now. And I think all of us as a board and district need to look at the entire canon of literature our students read from 6th to 8th grade and 9th to 12th grade, and also to really get a view of for the entire high school experience, what are they reading? And I think that's really important information. So that's what I'd like to hear from you. So thank you, Andy.
I'd just like to respond briefly to your comment, and I do understand what you're saying about, we have a choice tonight, or yes or no. No would leave us with what we believe would be the old class, unless we propose a new class, which would be purchasing materials, and I don't know how realistic that is. But that for me is the thing that frustrates me, is that we seem to get stuck in this position frequently where we're put into a timeline that is unrealistic. And we even talked about this at Teaching and Learning, that we wouldn't be seeing it until June, and how realistic was it to give actual feedback and make changes. And so once again, we're put in this position where you really don't have a lot of choices. So, and because this class has been talked about for so long, to me, it's just extremely frustrating to be in this position again where, well, if you vote no, then you're stuck with what you had. And that to me is just, it's not fixing the problem. We're just perpetuating it. And so I appreciate your comments. I just wanted to give you that feedback that having been on the board this long, we've talked about this for too long to be stuck again.
So I think that's a real feeling, that sense of take it or leave it. And that's sort of where we saw this coming in early June, when it was going to Teaching and Learning, the next day to a work session, went to discussion in June for the board, and here we are in July. To get around that, we would have had to have backed this up 3 to 4 months. And we could start to work towards some sort of consensus where we have more of a collaboration, more of a feedback, more of an ongoing dialogue with drafts. The trouble with that is the process that we valued to get to the June thing would have been truncated. We have a new administration last fall that started this work, and maybe the process was too long, but I think we saw that those months-long exercises and dialogues and collections of opinions and working groups that would meet repeatedly, we saw that coming as a long process. And so we were essentially, from the time we got a new administration taking this problem seriously in the fall and proposing their solution, we saw where this was going with a draft that would be coming to us towards the end of the school year, when teachers wouldn't be on their contract to continue the dialogue into June and July. And we didn't ask anything to change with that. So I don't want it to sound like this was sort of a typical ministry versus cabinet game where you're left with a take it or leave it choice. In fact, I think we got a document that, I agree with your words, substantially different. It probably would look different again if we had that consensus building process that would be several more months long. It probably wouldn't remain in this form. But I think take it or leave it is more of a harsh way. I think it's just the reality of where we are at after that process, and there are more processes to come. I disagree with the notion that I wouldn't be proud to have my kid in this course, but I agree with you that the process that would go towards consensus would probably produce something different as well. And I don't know if that sounds like it's two different ideas. To me, I sort of see how they make sense together. But
I think some compromises were offered, though, at our work
yeah,
session.
book switches
and
for the
we
raising the
didn't-
Lexile level
we
as
didn't incorporate
compromises.
those.
That's right. That's right. I think this group of parents has been extremely willing to compromise, and they've been upfront about the pursuit of different genres, not so much emphasis on postmodern books that are written after World War II or after 1920s, I guess it kind of depends on who you ask, and books that have a Lexile rating that's higher. Not just Lexile, but also Lexile rating that's higher. Minimum of 1080 is entry for 9th grade, and they're supposed to be well beyond that with support at the end of 9th grade.
Mhm.
And it's not a period, though. It's a nuance. It's many, many pages, many, many paragraphs, and I think there's an interpretation that gets us where we are now on good faith as well.
Well, I would say that I do support this class as it's presented. I think there's been a lot of points raised tonight. I don't dismiss Lexile. I believe that the teachers can take a particular book and craft writing assignments that can be quite in-depth based upon any of the books that are listed here. And so I'm going to accept, and I do trust our teachers, that they're going to provide adequate rigor to this class. I mean, in the perfect world, if there were one book different, that would be great. And I think that there was a suggestion that came up on Unit 1 to have a choice book. And if the teachers want to revisit that, that would be great. I'm not going to sit here and impose it, because I think that ultimately my job is to question what you present. But we as a board really are not teachers, with the exception of Amir. And I think that it would be a problem to substitute my judgment for theirs, so long as they come before the board, and you have, and say, here's the curriculum, here's how it's improved. And I think we all agree it's improved, that it addresses a number of these issues. And that, and again, as Erica said, Andy, you said that you're going to come back in November and say, here's why the class is working, or if it's not working, where it's not working. Because ultimately, implementation is what's going to carry this class. And so I do look and do trust our teachers to implement this class in a solid fashion. I do like the idea of earned honors. As I pointed out, it came from the teachers. And so I would absolutely say that's what I'm looking for in the second semester, or earlier if possible. In terms of this coming to us at the last minute, our normal curriculum review process is a 2+ year process. If we're going to compress it to a year, then this is the time frame we get. If we wanted to have more time to talk about it, we would be looking at this over 2 years, and we were talking about the fall of 2019. And I think that the board had indicated that we wanted to look at this for fall of 2018, and I am satisfied that the teachers have done a great job in improving this class, responding to needs of the parents that have articulated those needs, and I do look forward to it, assuming that it passes.
I appreciate your concern about trusting the judgment of the teachers, and I think that will be the only thing that makes this successful. First of all, students, and this is notorious across a lot of humanities and social sciences. There are classes where students joke about how easy it was to write a paper at the last minute, or to write it off one draft and get a good grade, or they sometimes complain about how they did it early and they did 2 drafts and they didn't get a good grade. And I think that comes down sometimes to what teachers are expecting and how they structure their course and their rubric, and trying to make students proud of the grade, even if it's a B, that they had to work hard and that they're actually proud of the work they produced. That's what makes a great course. That's what starts to make it rigorous, that it was difficult to understand the text and make some meaning from it and put that in context. And I think you can do that. You can get there with graphic novels. In fact, it's probably a skill that students should be exposed to developing, that juxtaposition of text and an image. And that's not sufficient. You also need to get there with some higher lexiles. There's so much more than just the story. If you can tell somebody what the book's about while you're on the elevator, you haven't gotten at all to text complexity. This idea of the way that they're saying something, the references that a character makes, to appreciate that. You should be able to stop and just appreciate a given paragraph in a good book. And it's not about the big reveal. Now we know who the mole is. It kind of reminds me of in my opinion, some of the good movies and good books are the ones where it's not about the twist, and once you know it, you never watch again, but it's about just being able to appreciate any given moment, enjoying that work of art. And a good teacher can bring that to light. I think in this case, it really took the village. The concerns with the course, where it had gone too far, were brought to light to me first from parents, not through the administration years ago. And students who talk to the parents, not every student wants to talk about their English course or any course or anything, with their parents, but the students and the parents who had these conversations, who brought them to light, were essential in getting this review out of sequence. I think that sort of multiple stakeholder valuing their status and their judgments, not each equally. It's not as if 2 emails from a parent, 2 emails from a teacher cancel out or anything, but that was critical to get us to this process. And likewise, evaluating where we're at over the next 12 months and more will take input from all of these same groups, again, from the teachers, from the students, from the parents, from the administration. It's going to be essential to figuring out where we're at. And I think we're starting to build some consensus with this earned honors. We're starting to have the conversation about a second registration option for next fall, which earned honors will be a part of that conversation. I just want to emphasize how far we've come and how we're not letting up with the pursuit of excellence in this case. And there are things that may seem out of place, like, for example, watching movies. First of all, 17, it struck me as a large number of movies, I'll say. But I remember watching Much Ado About Nothing, the movie, with Denzel Washington, and it really brought the play to life. And I got the jokes a little bit better with the way some of these charismatic actors were putting it out. And we would watch what we had read, and then hit pause and read some more and talk some more. And so it was a valuable teaching method, and it wasn't outright inappropriate. Too much of this, just like too many graphic novels and too many discussions about your own thoughts and your own feelings, apart from any serious criticism, any way the teacher could push back and say just objectively, I think, or objectively, I think you're at a C+ right now with where you're at. I think that is essential, and that's where teachers, to get back to the beginning of what I was saying, teachers can make or break this course just based off of their own rubrics and expectations of students digesting the materials that are in this proposal.
And by the way, this was said at prior meetings, but I mean, we do appreciate, or I certainly appreciate the work of administration to take this on in the summer and fall of last year. I mean, brand new to the system and kind of one of your first challenges. So I do appreciate that. I think I would like to make sure we have some clarity prior to voting. So in the event that it passes, are we looking for an acceptance of the earned honors proposal by the teachers for the second semester? So I need like verbal responses.
I am. I'd like that as a part of this, passing this.
Part of this what?
Part of approving.
Okay.
Yes.
That, yes. Amir?
Yeah, and I think that it would be something our teachers, I anticipate, would want to create in-house this process. But if what we're asking for is that there be a way to do it, I guess we're giving them first chance at creating that, and it'd probably be, I don't know much about how we pay for these things, but there'd probably have to be some additional look that goes into it from the administration. But if they were saying it needs to be done, it would be done either in-house or not for January.
And I'm just being cautious of the board creating new ideas. That's why I'm repeating this, as Andy has told us, that this originated from the teachers as an idea.
Well, if it passes, it'd be a movement in the right direction. So I would like more rigor and more opportunity for differentiation like that an honors enrichment would offer, yes.
So are there any other questions, discussions on this point, on the entire motion? All right. All those of approving the proposed AP 10 class, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion has carried. Thank you very much. Next, we are on to information. So, Erica, did you have items you wanted to point out on the Ad Hoc Communications Committee?
Sure. I guess there's no one manning the computer, is there?
Oh, you were hoping your slide would show up?
Oh,
I didn't realize.
okay. I didn't know this would be a discussion item, so this is more just an
Yeah, I thought it was
update.
just information.
Yeah. So it was put on the board, so the board can see what you have, but, okay.
If you wanted, because this information usually discussed and includes slides.
So information often isn't used, and so this is
Yeah.
an opportunity to expand out into new
Yep.
areas and use information for a broader purpose.
So we can bring it back in the August meeting if you want, and then update it then? And then put it in.
I could just verbally update.
Okay.
people.
That
Okay.
works.
Fine. So we kicked off the Ad Hoc Communications Committee in June or May, June? Was it? Okay.
Right before school got out.
Okay,
That week.
okay,
That
thank you
first
very much.
Wednesday that school got out.
Thank you. So we came up with a process, basically where we wanted to define what the problem was, what the goals were we were trying to get at, and then collect some information. I call it the measurement and analyze phase, where we wanted to benchmark what other districts were doing, evaluate our current communication channels and vehicles, and do a very small parent survey. What do you think of our current board communications? What are you looking for from the board? So on and so forth. Before we even moved into brainstorming suggestions, really getting everyone grounded in what is the current status, what are other districts doing, all of that good stuff. So from June until our next meeting, which is on Wednesday, that's what we've been doing. So our status as of now is we have gone through the define, measure, and analyze phase. So we've done the benchmarking, we've done the survey, we've done a complete evaluation of all of our communications channels and vehicles. And then in the next, over the next like 3 or 4 meetings, we're going to move on to our improvement phase, which is where we're going to be spending all of next week meeting brainstorming new ideas for how we can improve our communications channels, just based on the feedback that we've received from our survey and what we've seen in other school districts, sort of best practices. We're going to create actionable board recommendations, create new communications tools, and then develop communication standards and protocols. And then the final phase will be coming up with actual communications templates, if need be, measuring improvements, and then making changes if necessary. The goal is to bring actionable recommendations to the board by the end of August. And then depending on feedback from the board, if you guys say we like idea 5, 6, and 10, we potentially have people on our committee that are willing to volunteer to help create tools and communications for us to actually implement some of the ideas. So that's where we are as a committee right now.
It's a good group of people
Yeah, it's
bringing, and we've done some of the research that people have done looking into what other school boards in other districts do, has also been interesting and a good exercise.
Yeah, we have a really good group of people. So
Yep, and Erica's been running with it. So Lenny and I are just there for the background.
Moral support.
That's right.
no, that's not true. Do you guys have any questions or want more detailed information, or?
I think when the substantive stuff comes, it'll be.
Are you too tired?
I want to say thank you for your work, for the committee working on this. This is doing research is really thankless, I know, and getting it ready to this next step. We all will appreciate that.
I'm excited. I think they're going to come up with a lot of good actionable stuff. So,
No, I was going to comment on your PowerPoint. I mean, if you're a communications committee, it's a very well-created document, so it's an example of what you're doing. And you are putting a lot of work into it, so thank you.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. So, well, we'll be back in August with some ideas, so.
Erica likes her documents.
I do.
In case you haven't figured that out.
She's on the green.
All right. Is there any other information anybody would like to discuss? Announcements?
Matt's here.
Nick, what?
Matt is here.
Open meeting law doesn't allow you to cancel a plane flight, but I passed it last week. So I was standing in Boston Logan, and I had no option to switch ports. I'm very sorry for the missing.
Well, there's our announcement.
Sorry.
Yes, Ellen?
So we're going to move on to the AP.
Do we have the policy?
Those aren't
AP
discussion items,
exam
are they?
summary.
So I think that that's included, I think the listing of a presenter is inaccurate. I think it's just included for informational purposes. It's a little misleading because it has a presenter listed.
So it's in board book for our edification, but there's
And
nobody
for the
talking.
public. And for the
Right.
public, I will tell you, it's very impressive.
Some of those AP
Turn on your mic.
No, I said that I'm really shocked that we're not having a presenter on this because I'm very proud of the AP exam scores and that that we are just keeping this to ourselves. We've got some the AP exam summary is really phenomenal, so.
And I have to say, I'm not sure, have we included this before?
No. I
No,
haven't seen it.
I want to, whoever came up with the idea of including this, thank you, because this is fabulous, and just even as a parent, to be able to look at the individual courses and say, like, comparative government, I mean, to look and break down, 5s, 4s, 3s, and it shows, I mean, some of these classes are hard for a kid to get a 5 on these AP tests. So I love this data. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, some of these classes are taken by ninth graders who are taking AP classes.
Yeah,
So-
like AP Euro
No.
is, yeah, and AP Gov,
AP
all of
Gov.
it. It's really pretty impressive. So thank you for sharing it with us.
All right. All right. Any other questions, updates, announcements? Are there any? Yeah, no? Any objections to adjourning? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, we've been passing them down to Lenny.
I have some.
Hi, how are you? I have to defend my terminology of functionally ill. So, that's pretty well known. So did you. Yeah, I've been, and you got a 3 on the AP. But, you. Yeah, did Stella and River, right? Caroline. I did so. Somebody needs to be saying. Thank you for your, other than that, I'm actually. So, yeah, so good job getting